Hello and welcome back to the SoapyRao show. On today's episode, I'm joined by someone very special, a lady who wears multiple hats and is successful wearing all these hats. She's the host of the Made in India podcast, one of the most successful and popular podcasts. She was a radio personality with Radio 1 Mumbai, and she runs a podcast production company which is also named Made in India. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the SoapyRao show the fantastic Mae Thomas, straight from Robin Hood.
Yay! It's so
How
good
are
to
you?
be here. I'm good. I'm so honored. I also like the fact that I wear lots of hats.
Yeah.
I feel like they should be like I wonder what hats, like, a fedora, maybe
I don't know.
on cap.
I think, you would look, I don't think those, some of those people who go to concerts wear those really tall ones. No, I think you need something classy. I think a fedora maybe one. I think a beret may be cool, but I don't know.
Ooh, a beret would be nice.
I mean, do you smoke a pipe or do you paint? I don't know. There's a stereotype with each hat. I don't like those stereotypes which come with each hat.
There is a stereotype with each hat. That's so
Like
true.
those baseball hats, and you know this, and you have a bit of an American accent, so you might know this. That Americans call caps hats.
Yeah,
It's
that
really
is
weird.
true. Plus,
Like-
I lived in the UK for many years, so there's so
the
many
accent
things
sounds
that
familiar.
the British. I think the Brits also say different things for different stuff. So if you say, like in the US, if you say pants, like that's normal trousers, as we say
Yeah,
in India.
that's chuddies in the
But-
UK though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's studies in the UK. So
But
if
I love
you
the fact
say,
that they still
"Put your
use the
pants
word
on," you'll be like,
knickers. They use knickers. I love it.
yes.
Oh, I love it. They're like, yeah.
Knickers is a great word. I also like it.
Trainers, there's
It's
another
like-
one they use.
Trainers.
Yeah.
So knickers is always great because it kind of feels like underwear. It's just not as exciting
Chaddies.
as chaddies. It's not
I
as
want
exciting as,
British
like,
people to
knickers.
say Indian words like, hello, mate, you wearing your chuddies, eh? Yeah, chuddies. Hey, but
Even in the same way. Yeah, sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
it's amazing that you've done all these things, and I want to talk about every sort of aspect of what's brought you here. Because I keep calling you up. I'm like, May, I need help. How do I do this? What is this? And you always are on call and willing to help. And I thought, I'll use this opportunity to get your story out there. But of course, you've shared your story. But I also want to talk about how you've sort of now. Kind of directing a lot of people in the podcasting space in India. But before that, of course, we met in, I think, 2013-14 when you were working at Radio 1. So how do you get to radio, and how you said you were in the UK? How did you get to Mumbai in the first place?
So actually, I like to call it Bombay because I've
course.
lived here since the 80s and 90s.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, this was as every somehow some relation. If you're Malayali, you have someone in the Middle East. I was one of those Malayalis in the Middle East.
Oh, yeah.
But
Okay.
Bombay was always my base in the sense
Right.
that some people Bangalore is their base, they live in Kuwait or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, Bombay was always a place I came back to because I have my mom was working here, my dad was working here, and when I was really young, we moved to the Middle East, and then I came back to India and I was in boarding school for a very large chunk of my life. And then when I finished my 12th standard, I went to the UK and I did my uni there. So I was in uni.
Okay, you've done your
Yeah,
university.
I did my undergrad and my postgrad, plus I worked there for 2 years. So I was there in the UK for about 6 years. And it was amazing, but it was also a weird time when I graduated because that's pretty much when the recession happened. So trying to get a job there and stay on was really hard, which is why I ended up coming back. Because I started out actually as a radio journalist. I was a news editor for a community radio station while I was in the UK, and it was so exciting. And it was me and a Scottish guy who were the head of news for like a community radio station in like Newport, Wales. It was bizarre.
Man, I can write like
it was quite funny. And
a sitcom like Fraser, based on that. A Malu and a Scottishman. A Scotch, Malu and a Scotch. That'd have been good.
Correct.
No, but did you feel like if you had
was,
stayed
and
back
he
there, you would have
actually-
had this in radio? You would have gone further into radio, or would you have been given enough
probably would have
opportunity?
stayed in radio. Yeah, I probably would have stayed in radio for a while because I loved being a journalist and I loved doing it on radio. I just
Hmm.
always loved the audio medium in general.
Yeah.
And then doing news, like coming back to India and not being able to be a journalist in radio. I'm not even talking about like, I mean, I didn't do AIR or anything, but I think that
Yeah.
was kind of disheartening. But I
Do
stayed
we
in
have
radio
radio
even when I
journalism
came
in
back.
India?
I mean, if you work in AIR, like All
No, I
India
mean, let me
Radio.
repeat the question. Do we have radio?
Well done. Smooth, my friend. Smooth.
Yeah, smooth. We don't, and this is a podcast. We're not going to get like a license is not eligible. But no, it's I think a great space. I think when you listen to things like NPR, right? And when I was doing my university in Wales as well, I still love listening to
Oh,
radio. I
where
mean,
were you in Wales?
I was in Swansea.
You were in
I was in
Swansea.
Swansea. It actually felt like I
Oh,
had better speaking skills. I think that's why my parents are like, at least I feel less retarded going to
yeah.
Wales.
That's true. I was in Cardiff. So I was in Cardiff, but
Oh,
I was in Cardiff Uni.
that's a great place.
Swansea
So,
was like
yeah,
I've been to Swansea and I've been out in Swansea. There's a high street full of bars. I've been
I
there.
worked there. Can you believe one of the bars there called the Orange House? I was a waiter.
Oh, what was that area called? I
That was called
forgot.
the Kingsway.
The
They
Kingsway.
had bars like the Orange House. They had a nightclub called Time and Envy. This was in 2001 and 2.
Time and Envy.
Yeah, then they had a really,
Um,
really cool, cheesy nightclub called Jumping Jacks. And
oh
on
my
Thursdays, they had a thing
God.
called VK Heaven, which is, those breezer drinks, which are like orange and sugar and death in a bottle. So
Pretty much, yeah.
£4.99, 99, all you can drink. And the next
Oh,
day, oh my God, your poop looks like it's just
fluorescent green.
green, pink. It's like a pride parade. No offense, but it's just
That's terrible. But Swansea is rough. Like one of a really good friend of mine was from Swansea. The only wonderful thing about Swansea is the Gower, which is beautiful.
that's the
I
waterfront,
think. Yeah, that's like the
Mumbles and all that.
sea-facing cliff. Yeah,
Yeah.
mumbles and all that. Yeah, yeah,
It's actually a charming place. I didn't really know
yeah.
much about anything back then in the sense that it was my first time out of India. So I was like, okay, if the rest of the world is like this, India's not too bad. And
Well, you went straight to Swansea. You went to the back end
yeah,
of beyond, my friend.
I think it was now in hindsight, maybe it was my parents' ploy to just this fingers crossed going, maybe he won't find his way back. But do you feel like this thing, right? Because I sometimes think about it, the actual academic aspect of what I studied at university, whether it was in the UK or in the US, really didn't apply too much of it. But this thing of being able to sort of carry on a conversation, being able to sort of fend for yourself, being able to sort of live in an environment which is not home, and also adapting through speech, like because I'm like you, very sort of keen on how people speak, how I should speak. I kind of made that a big sort of point to consider when I was like getting my V's and W's right. And do you feel that kind of experience and being able to switch between and back and forth between accents and also knowing your sort of what you as an Indian sound like, all these things sort of helped in your repertoire towards becoming what you are today?
I think so. I mean, I think, and this is something that I learned through a musician friend of mine, which was being what they call a third culture kid, which means growing up in a culture that you're not originally from.
Hmm.
So, you know, being an Indian, but like growing up in the Middle East where I was in like an international school and there were people from, the US. I had a Canadian class teacher. I had Egyptians and like Filipinos and like all kinds of people in school with me. You
Yeah.
kind of sort of always get used to not being surrounded by people who either A, didn't really look like you and B, didn't really speak like you.
Mm.
And also had very different experiences. Like one of my best friends was a girl called Marwa who was Egyptian and she was amazing. And
Yeah.
I growing up with that, I kind of got used to it so that even when I came back to India or I was in the UK, I had friends who had come and visited me in India and were like, wow, like you're like the same person, but you're not the same person. So
Mm.
even though I acted the same, they could also see that I was like this, I was able to just still be myself, but also adapt to different places in my way. And so I think
Yeah.
I always was kind of always being me. It was just that I had this ability to be able to communicate with, and I think that's also part and parcel of like growing up in boarding school, where I think that's where I sort of like came into my own. I suddenly realized people liked, I was funny and people liked the same weird stuff that I did, and I cracked jokes. And then when you go abroad, it's like you do the same thing, and yeah, and I loved being in the UK, and I still am in touch with so many of my friends who are there. And
Yeah.
I think that ability to just adapt, I don't know if it's just a genetic Malayali trait that we have, but to just be that kind of chameleon and be able to, no matter where you are, just be able to find common ground with people. And it's
Yeah.
funny because I would be able to do that with anyone. And I used to be on the basketball team, and there was a German girl, and there were all these like British girls, and like her and I got along really well because we used to just make fun of all the Brits and like yeah. And so her and I had like common ground, and so it didn't matter where you were from. You just kind of feel like you're drawn to certain people. But yeah, I think being a journalist in general helped me sort of, because I think I've always been curious about people.
Mhm.
So in being able to, I think that's the thing that I feel like made me who I am today, which is that I feel like I'm a relatively good interviewer. And I like,
Yeah.
getting to know people and understanding them. And also, the thing that I pride myself on is that to not take yourself too seriously, and not take the guest too seriously either. So I've done everything. Like I've literally interviewed. I think the when I was in Chennai and I was working for a radio station there, we'd interviewed some kind of like Australian or UK ambassador or something like that, and we ended up talking about chaddis. Like literally, I'm not even
Knickers, you
kidding. We were
mean?
talking, yeah, knickers. Sorry, darling. But it was so funny because he sort of chimed in and had fun, and like I think it's just being able to break down this sort of wall that people have, right? Like you have to
Yeah.
say things in a particular way, or you have to like sometimes it's okay just to knock it all down and just have a little fun.
And I think that's that ability, right? I think more than any official sort of, whether it's called an interviewer, host, I think it's this ability to strike up a conversation and finding fundamental
Mm.
connections which go beyond the demand or the requirement of that interview. And I think that's great because, I mean, we had this notion, right? Interview has to sound, it has to be a
Mm.
back and forth in a very sort of structured way. But I think, as you said, it's great to just have a fun thing. Like, obviously there needs something needs to come out of it, which is for that particular agenda. But I think otherwise, just have a blast and have a ball and don't take yourself too seriously. And I think
Yeah.
yeah, you've done that for years on, and I think that I was on another show, and I think at that point when you were working there, and I think the
Mm.
Radio One platform did because I think it was one of the few English networks in India. I would
Yeah.
listen to it, but I think from your experience working there to today, how is that landscape? Because Indian radio never really followed in the footpath or in the footsteps, if you want to call it, of British radio or American radio or NPR. We had kind of our own thing. So how is that space in radio? Then now the audio sort of podcasting
Yeah.
space. What's the landscape looking like, and how was your experience in radio? Let's probably start from there.
So I mean, you're also someone who has been part and parcel of the radio world too, so it's not like I'm the only one. But I
Yeah,
have
mine
to
was much shorter
admit,
though, and I kind of came in later when I kind of like after the party is over, and that guy was like taking all those cups with half drinks, drinking them, going, "Dude, was this still radio?" So I'm like
I know
creep.
those guys.
Yeah, but man, all the guys, all the drugs are over. Like, I want cotton candy. Like, I'm that guy.
Yeah.
So,
This so my thing with radio is that especially in India, and I'm talking about private commercial FM stations,
mhm,
they're honestly, because of the fact that it is extremely expensive to function, a radio station in India, whether
yeah,
it's paying for the license or the overheads of running a station. That's why there are such few radio stations, private FM radio stations in India, run by big media conglomerates with very deep pockets, which
mm,
is why you have the Times and,
yeah,
HTs of this world, and they're the ones that own radio stations because anyone else can't afford it.
Yeah.
And so in Bombay, which is a population of 26 million people, and you have like 7 or 8 radio stations, of which like all of them are Bollywood except for one, which is like there's no genre based radio, there's no like Indian folk station,
Yeah.
there's no like station that just plays Mahabharata 24/7. Like there's nothing of that sort.
Which is a pity, I
Because
think. No?
because it's so expensive to run a radio station. Like
Right.
this must have been like 4 or 5 years ago. Basically the frequencies, like a radio license is bought for like a particular frequency, and they sell it via an auction. And
Yeah.
so I think about 4 or 5 years ago, HT bid on like a Delhi license, radio license, and it was like 150 crore just for the radio license alone.
Which
And
is not a
that's like
lifetime license, has to be renewed, right?
yeah, so it's
Great.
a 15-year license.
Fuck,
And then
yeah.
on top of that, you have to pay everyone who works at the station. You have to also rent the tower that you're broadcasting from, which is again government owned. And
Great.
so everything, yeah, it's so like it's very, very expensive to run a station here.
So it's
And
almost
so
like there's no incentive to do it. It's just like fuck it, no one cares. And then you have to make up that money by filling up 1 hour with 59 minutes of ads.
correct. And so that's why a lot of the time with radio, some of them are running into the red. You're like sometimes you have some radio stations, like even Radio One, you have some radio station in like Calcutta, like or some random place, and there are like 3 people working at the station,
Yeah.
like Aizawl in Mizoram or something. Like it's just
Yeah.
absolutely sparse because you're trying to make the money. So the thing that I find with radio is that not that I don't love it. I love it's such a buzz that this. Like the moment you like push a fader and you're like live on air, it really
I never
is.
went live.
Oh,
Because my
I
shows from 5 to 9, I would get thirsty.
so I was you clearly got a peak time slot. I was the afternoon jock. So
Oh,
I
nice. I love the
had
afternoon radio. I think that's a great
so
slot
chill.
because
And
you have less pressure on the ads, right?
yes! So I had lesser ads on my show.
How cool.
Plus, I had the request show. So it was so chill. I had the most fun show. I
I like
basically
that.
didn't have any real sales commitments, and because I just
Gosh,
used to
those
do the
guys are
afternoon
such
version.
pains, man. I mean, I'm not saying all radio stations have annoying salespeople, but I'm saying most, in fact, all
I
radio
mean,
stations.
I have to say they have like they could sell you taking a dump on air to Parryware. Like
Yeah.
that's how amazingly talented the sales guys were.
I
They
think
could
you
sell
worked at a good
anything.
station because I think some of the people, they were just getting more and more
did.
Peps mattresses. I'm like, fuck, how many mattress brands exist? Peps mattress, All American mattress made in Amritsar. Fuck it.
But it is, I have to say that I know everyone's all like, ooh, peak time, morning or evening
No, I
RJ,
didn't
whatever.
like it.
I loved being an afternoon RJ. Like you said, lesser ads. Like no one would know that except for you. I barely had any ads. So I played
Yeah.
more music.
No, I would listen to sometimes the
played
Goa show, or I would listen to the afternoon show, and I'm like, man, first of all, the music, you don't have to play only the chart busters or the same cycle of those 5 songs, which is, Nicki Minaj or Jason Derulo or whatever's trending on that day.
Correct,
But you
yeah.
can actually play, as you said, requests, so you can play a little bit more retro, whatever the station flavor, but go a little offbeat, which is great.
I had so much fun. And it genuinely, like with radio, I loved that part of it. The thing
Yeah.
that was difficult for me, which is why I left radio, wasn't that I didn't love the medium. It was just that I felt quite creatively stifled in the sense that if I had any ideas, if I wanted to go a little out there and do some fun things, I was kind of restricted by not being able to do the fun things I wanted to do, even if they would, even if they had monetary value, right? Like,
Yeah.
for example, I started when before I did the afternoon show, I was doing the weekend show, which is the reason why I know so many comedians like
Yeah.
yourself.
I think you,
Because
in
of the
fact, got
fact that
Sanjay or a couple of comedians we know, and you got them on the show. Yeah, yeah.
So on the weekend show, I used to do this little segment because I realized that like comedy was just coming up, and the Canvas Laugh Factory had just opened up and all that, and I was like, you would go to a show, but you would just not know who Tapan Verma was, or you wouldn't know who Ashish Shakya was, or you wouldn't know
Yeah.
who Kanis Surka was. You just didn't know who they were. They were just names on a lineup and you had no clue what kind of comedy they did or who they were. So
Yeah.
what I thought I'd do is that I would just interview them so that you had a chance to get to know them. And then when you went for
Hmm.
their show, you're like, I heard about these guys on the radio. I gotta go check him
Yeah.
out. He's funny.
And
And
it's
so,
kind of almost like all these mediums complement each other, right? TV, radio.
of
It's kind
course.
of they plug in the holes in society where some people might miss a show where you're interviewing a comedian, but you hear them on radio, and that's sort
Yeah.
of what's happened in the US, right? Like a guy does or a girl
Yeah,
does or whatever. They may do an entire campaign across when they're promoting a movie or a book. They do it
of
across
course.
mediums, so you hear it.
But
Yeah,
yeah, but this is the thing. This was at a time like I said, Canvas Live had just come up. These comedians, like people didn't even know this was a thing,
yeah,
and then they kind of stopped me. They were like, "You're giving comedians too much exposure," and I'm like, "What is it? It's not like it's like Godrich or something. This is like just a
yeah,
bunch of people."
yeah,
And so I was so, and the funny thing is now. If you had to get a comedian to be on the radio, you know how much that would cost you?
yeah.
Like now,
No, absolutely. That are the
I'm
names you
like,
mentioned. They're big now.
yeah,
And
and
they
so
come
like
with
it's
an
a
entire tech rider of like, you know what, I need my Dom
yeah.
Perignon next to me when I'm doing the radio
I
show.
know. So fancy and all that, not okay.
I don't know,
But
there's
it's
something,
so
some
expensive
equivalent.
now, and like
Yeah,
they all have representation. They all have, and so
yeah.
now it's very different. I used to do stuff that was so fun.
And actually, that's the thing I want to ask you is whether it's internet radio, whether it's podcasting. Do you think audio as a medium, do you think Indians like listening to conversations or they want to be entertained by visuals? What is your experience from it?
So I have to be super honest here and say that I think as Indians, we there are two things that I realize, with
Hmm.
what we love. Number one is that we love storytelling, and audio is a wonderful medium for that. Whether that's through Bollywood films or whether that's through, story. Like I'm not even kidding. The reason when I realized the real power of audio is just my this many years ago, my parlor lady. I was going to get some waxing done, and then she, when I got there, was listening to the radio on her mobile phone. And I
Right.
asked her what she's listening to, and she's like, "Oh, there's this guy on Sunday, and he tells these really nice love stories. I like listening to."
Hey, that's that guy, Love Guru.
I thought he was in the night.
There
This
was
is like
one
in the
guy
middle
in
of the
Bangalore,
afternoon.
or still is, and he's really popular. He does it in Kannada, and he's similar stories, and he does it in a very sort of baritone voice. I mean, I'm sure it's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
model, which is
Same kind of,
across
yeah,
Radio
across the
City. I
board.
think they have it across channels in different languages, but yeah, I've heard it, and when
So
I'm in the cab, these guys love it. It's just sort of so gripping to them.
yeah. And so when you think of people, like the great thing about audio, and they call it, I mean, in podcasting, they keep saying this, they call it like a companion medium, right? Because
Uh
you
huh.
can do other things while you're listening to audio. So you can drive a rickshaw, you can sit, while your security guard is sitting in your building. What else is he going to do? He'll just listen to
Yeah.
something. So usually you can do it. And like I said, the two things that as Indians we love is we love storytelling. And we also like to be informed. Like one of the things that I realize is that that's how they get their news. That's how they listen to cricket commentary. That's how they
Yeah.
listen to everything. And so audio is a really great place where um, you're able to also communicate in a way that, like, I don't necessarily have to be able to read and write to be able to listen to a story. And I think we are, as a culture, we do love listening to stories, and we love listening to people and speak and understand
Right.
what they're saying and get to comprehend things through listening to a medium. So
So
I
you
think audio as a medium is quite
powerful.
ingrained, yeah, in India. It's
Yeah.
just that like we do it in different ways.
So you think all this phase of Amazon, Netflix, all these movies and being consumed on YouTube is just a fix we need? Like, oh my God, it's a new thing, and audio will always be. Then that sort of leads me to this phase we are in right now, where India is sort of witnessing this explosion. And you'll be in a good place to answer this and know what's happening with podcasting. I think the past 3 years or 2 years has seen like a massive increase in the number of people trying their hand at podcasting, people exploring the medium, people sort of doing interviews, people talking about things that interest them. As you said, a city of 26 million like Bombay, there's everything from people who are like, coming up with artists from Dharavi to people doing cooking shows from South Bombay. So you have across the spectrum, across languages. And is that something that you're noticing as a podcast producer? This is the hat where you sort of are approached by different people to produce their podcast. So what is the trend you're seeing on that front?
So I have to say that it's interesting for me because audio is anyway a medium that I love. It's also the medium that I work in because
Yeah,
I don't really know anything else. Like I'm not a videographer. I don't understand video as well as someone who actually like trained and like learning video. For me,
yeah,
it's always been audio. Like
yeah,
I initially when I started my company, people were like, but no one is audio is like you should do video. No, audio is not a thing.
yeah.
And I had to like battle so many people who were only advising me to get into video. And I'm like, but I don't know video, man. Audio is
Yeah,
my jam.
absolutely. I'm with you on that.
And so my sort of experience with audio right now is that definitely podcasting is a growing medium in the country. People are still getting used to it. And
Yeah,
how people access it is in so many different ways. So whether someone sends you like a WhatsApp forward or someone like tweets at you or just shares something with you, like whatever that may be, people want to listen because it's a way, and I do feel like audio compared to like a visual medium is so much more intimate and so much more
yeah.
personal because it's literally someone you're wearing headphones and it's someone in your ear, right? They're
And you
literally
feel like you
talking
know
to
them.
you.
If you listen to like your podcast, I'm
Yeah,
sure fans of the Made in India podcast, when they meet you, they're like, they can
we're
actually,
friends.
and I think this is something which I really like, and to add to your point, sorry for if I interrupted your thought,
No, it's okay.
but is I really think that when I meet, say, a podcaster versus, say, someone who does say like a TV talk show, I really think when I listen to like 6 hours or 7 hours of, say, Joe Rogan's podcast, because I listen to that, or maybe I listen to like, say, Sam Harris, or these names, or even if I listen to, say, an Indian podcast, I really think that I can actually have a conversation with them as opposed to just be like in awe of them, like, oh, I made like a fan moment. Like you actually get to know
Yeah.
the person and feel like you can connect with them, because that's what podcasting does. It goes beyond just scratching the surface of, oh, I'm in awe because this person's famous.
That's true. And I feel like that was the same way I felt even when when you talk about radio presenters and RJs as well, right? It's
Yeah,
so different when you sort of meet an actor and then you meet an RJ, you meet a TV personality, and then you meet
yeah,
an RJ. Like, I always had this thing where people just felt more comfortable with you because they really feel like they know you and they feel
yeah.
like you've been their friend and their companion through all their
It's not
commutes.
as
And
glamorous, but it is more intimate.
but I feel like it may not be as glamorous, but I feel like it's more down to earth.
Absolutely, that I agree
So,
with. And you can
and
actually laugh. And sometimes, even I've had this in my short stint in radio, people laughing, going, "Dude, do you really like those mattresses?" I'm like, "Fuck no, dude." you know,
yeah,
and
they'll
I'm
rag
like,
you like
sometimes I tell
nicely.
them, I am like, little secret, those traffic updates which you hear at 9 p.m. I recorded them at 4. They're like, "You bastard! How can you do that?" I got stuck in traffic.
Because of you. And I'm not even kidding. I'm still in touch with people who were my fans from radio. I'm
How
not
cool!
even kidding. There were like a bunch of these really young girls who used to always request for One Direction songs. And and I remember someone was trolling me on Twitter,
Uh huh.
and these girls just like ganged up on him and just were like, "Don't you be mean to me." And I'm like, "Oh my God, these guys are
Whoa.
amazing." And just I don't know. They're these fiery, incredible young girls who I just thought were amazing. And now I met one of them, and she's a designer, and she interviewed me on a show that she would like on something that she was doing on Instagram with her brother. Like, and she was like a fan of Made in India. Now she's interviewing me on Insta Live, and so
How cool is that?
I think, yeah, it's amazing. And I do feel like you do keep in touch with people who were your fans. They want to, talk to you. And I've never felt in any way that it was like, and of course, it's not everyone's experience that
Yeah.
sometimes people can be very obtrusive. But I also feel like I've been really lucky and I've had some really great people who've been fans of the show or fans
Yeah.
of me. And yeah, and I do agree with you. I do think there's a huge difference between podcasting and radio because I think that the thing with radio is that once it goes on air, it's gone, right? And the thing with
Yeah.
audio is that this conversation, people can come back to it years from now.
Radio is a bit like
And
Clubhouse that way. I think Clubhouse is like the new radio. Like you say it there, it sort of sparks all this outrage going, oh my God, how could you say that eggplant has violated Indian pride or something? And then next thing, it's not recorded for something. No,
Yeah,
because
but like
yeah.
Clubhouse is just, I have to say, there's also a huge difference in radio and Clubhouse. At least I can listen to some music on the radio. But
No,
like
I was, yeah,
Clubhouse
going to say
is
that.
just,
What is that
I have
phenomenon,
a
right?
problem with I have like, okay, I'm gonna be straight here. Because a lot of people are like, Clubhouse is just like podcasting, yeah. And
I
I'm
don't
like,
think so.
a rambly conversation doth a podcast not make. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's Clubhouse. It's just people
No, and I
talking on and
think
on
that,
and on. There's no editor. I can't deal with that.
Clubhouse is, and I'm going to sound like a total prick when I say this, but
So do I. We'll
when
click
you have
together.
this Instagram social media thing which encourages, and it's mainly, and the main reason why they encourage people to engage or to get on the platform and share their thoughts, share their photos, is for the platform to benefit, so you can show more ads to these people. But I really don't think everyone can be an Instagrammer. I don't think everyone should be a podcaster, and I don't think everyone can be an effective orator, right? Because when sometimes I would join these Clubhouse rooms, and some people are really good in capturing your attention when they have points to make, and these people are typically either journalists or they may be musicians talking about what they know, people who know what they're talking about. But it doesn't mean, and of course, for every one of those, there are probably 10 people who are just like, oh, I can get heard on this platform. But then you have the occasional gem who's just like, wow, where did this person come from? And you follow them. But this is the kind of generation I think we live in, where everyone is told that you can be great at everything you do, which is not the fucking case, right? Because you either have a flair for it, or you spend years honing that
Or you
skill,
suck at
or
it.
you love doing it. And now people are just like, oh, I'm going to be on every platform because just because I can. So I'm going to be on Twitter, on Instagram, on Snapchat, on TikTok, on Clubhouse, on podcasting. And, this is the
Can I
thing.
just say one thing? Sandeep would be
Yeah.
a terrible career counselor. You'd be like,
Yeah.
you know what? You think you're good at something? You're not.
No, if you think you're good at something, then you should probably stick to it, not like jump to the next hot platform because someone said that you can become famous on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't know if this is true or not. I do think that Clubhouse is a tiny bit of a fad. I just
Yeah.
feel like it will peter out a little bit.
Yeah.
The great thing, I mean, and again, only because I work in this medium, the great thing about podcasting is that it's not live, right? So you can listen to it, and it's the whole idea of on-demand media in general, right? We're
Yeah.
talking about Netflix and Amazon. You can watch anything, and with podcasting you can listen to anything at any, like, that's the difference also now between broadcast and on demand, that we're moving into that space, because I can't like make it in time at 9 p.m. to watch that one thing that I get. No, I don't have time.
Yeah,
And
which was
I
a
want to be able
stress,
to like,
right? A point
yeah,
of
so that
stress
if
that,
I'm watching something I can watch, and now everyone wants to binge. Even if you have time, you're like, I'll just binge the whole thing on the weekend.
right.
Who waits now? Who waits 1 week and all that for the next
Those days
episode
are
to turn
gone.
up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Balls, anyone would do that nowadays.
But do you think
But
things are becoming like, as you said, even podcasting is a bit of a fad, like, after the
I
big,
don't say podcasting. I said Clubhouse is a fad.
no, no, not,
Podcasting is not a fad. I
what
work
I
in
mean by a
it.
fad
But people
is
coming around it. Shut up, Sandeep.
when I looked, when Joe Rogan signed that massive deal, every comedian is like starting a podcast, like, oh, dude, I'm going to be, and how does that work? Like, so in India, advertisers, so the American model would be subscription or Patreon or getting sponsors, endorsement, whatever. But none of that exists in India right now, right?
So the thing is that please also understand that Rogan, and one thing about him is that he was like a little ahead of the game in terms of like just being one of the first comedians to have like his own show that he's been
Yeah.
building for decades,
I
by
think
the way. It's
11
not
to
like this.
13 years, and his guests were
Yeah.
famous from back then. Like, he had access to the crop of the comedians.
Yeah, and he also wasn't someone who just like overnight this happened.
Yeah.
Right now he's been working for years, decades.
1,700 shows is not a joke. I mean, episodes.
Yeah, and by the way, that's like it's numbered. He also has like little mini episodes in between. Also, he's
Yeah.
doing some MMA stuff, and
Yeah.
besides that, he also built an audience on YouTube. He also has been doing so much other stuff, and so
And he had enough money coming in before Spotify. He was making a
Yeah.
shitload
So,
before
by the
Spotify.
way, he
People
was also
forget
one of
about
the-
all that.
he was one of the first comedians also to like this whole thing of having a special. He was like one of the first to have been doing like stuff like that. So I feel like Rogan has had quite a
Yeah.
career before he
Yeah.
even like and built himself up for years. Like, how old is the bugger now?
Yeah.
And you think that like we're trying to, one of the things is that he worked very hard to build a community around his show, which is why his show is so popular.
Yeah.
If you look at the top 10 podcasts in the world, majority of them are usually either NPR shows or big, radio stations from the US who
Hmm.
own a bunch of like, who
Yeah.
own like media houses or whatever.
Sorry,
And
what's that
he's
famous
like,
one? The not Parcast, the other one, which
there's like
Gimlet.
Wondery, there's Gimlet, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the same space, he's like one of the very few independent podcasters who's like there in the
Yeah.
top 10.
I mean,
And it
Howard
is
Stern is
because
one of
he's
those
like,
guys, but then again, he's
so like
huge.
Jay Shetty is also one of those guys. Like there
Oh,
are
good
loads
lord!
of them.
And that's my thing right now. With of course, I think that's the important thing that people forget, that just by doing a podcast, for interviewing your 10 friends in your circle and doing 10 episodes, going, why am I not getting a Spotify deal? It doesn't work that way. But
Yeah, and you have to like, I think one thing is that people just assume that the money is going to come your way. And I'm like, no, you have
oh
to build your
yeah,
community, build the base, your listenership base, because
yeah,
just like radio, the first thing if you want to monetize, there are various ways you can do it. One is like you
yeah,
said, a subscription model where people maybe listen to your show because you're providing information that doesn't exist anywhere else. Like there is a
yeah,
podcast called like Exponent, which is such a very, very specific show that talks about, media and is for specific people. So if there are podcasts that exist for that, or maybe you're doing something where you have sponsors. Most podcasts monetize through sponsorship,
hmm,
right? So then you're creating brand deals where you're working with different brands and you're selling, and that way you have to sell your listenership, right? Which is what you
yeah,
do on the radio. You're like,
correct.
I've got
So it's
20
back to
million
that.
listeners in Bombay. Same
Yeah,
thing. But that's how any media works in the
absolutely.
world.
Yeah,
And so in the same vein, like podcasting is also that, like you either have a sponsorship or you had ad revenue, or
mm,
if you license your show. So one of the things, it hasn't really come up here in India as much, and I've only ever done it once or twice, like with platforms that were just cropping up in India at that time,
yeah.
which was that I licensed my show to Savan, now Geo Savan. I
This
had
is the
licensed
Made
my
in
show
India
to,
show.
yeah, and to Jukebox, which was now non-existent, like that was with Book My Show. So that was a
Yeah,
licensing deal. That was that
yeah,
you get like the first, the episode that comes out early, and you license my show for that much time. And so that and all, there are loads of ways in which you can monetize. But I
yeah,
wouldn't be even. I've also been doing this for like 6 years. I've released an episode every week, and I've gotten
yeah,
to that stage like now. Like so, it
yeah.
takes time.
No, absolutely.
And
Sometimes I kick myself because 2012 or 13, I had just signed up with QKey, and I started my first podcast back then called Soapy Thoughts. And I was like, I think I did about maybe 20 episodes, and I'm like, this podcasting business is shit, bro. And then I did another one on SoundCloud for a bit called Amusing Musings. And literally, I was like, when I look back, I mean, no regrets, but I'm like, man, if you had stuck to this. And finally, I'm sitting here today, like the Baby Bed podcast evolved into this thing, and we've sort of spoken about this particular
yeah.
topic, which is sticking at it, doing it because you want to do it, and not just like, okay, looking at stats all the time. Those are important, but that shouldn't be your driving force alone. And I feel now, and correct me if you think that there's a different trend, is just like how Netflix, Amazon gets popular people. I mean, of course, talented people, no doubt about it. But sometimes you just get a person because they've got 1 million subscribers on YouTube to be in your series because you sort of draw that audience. I think that's what's happening with these platforms in podcasting as well. You get people who are popular YouTubers, popular Instagrammers to sort of do podcasting. So you are hoping as a platform that those subscribers, those fans come to your Audibles or your Spotify or your Amazon Music. And I think that's great. Of course, that's I think obvious marketing ploy. But are these people good at podcasting? We don't know. And sometimes I feel as a result of getting those people who are good at one thing to do another thing, you kind of are selling yourself short because those fans don't like these people who are YouTubers as podcasters. So you kind of are getting screwed into a corner both ways.
I honestly think it really depends,
Yeah.
because I understand where you want to use quote unquote an influencer
Yeah.
to do or create a podcast because you feel like you can leverage their audience to do something.
Yeah.
And this is not just an influencer, this could be any celebrity. Like, for
Anyone,
example,
of course. Yeah. Yeah.
getting Harsha Bogle to host the Mission ISRO podcast. Obviously, you have
I'm
like
sorry, what? He's hosting a mission ISRO?
yeah, this has been out since last year. It's what
But
do you
this is the
call it?
cricket commentator, right?
Yeah, it's a Spotify original.
Why is he
So
doing? I
and
mean, I haven't heard the podcast, but is it as the name suggests about things that ISRO is doing?
yeah, so basically,
Hmm.
Mission ISRO is telling the story of ISRO, and
Right.
he's voicing it. So he's not a host, but he's like it's a
Okay.
scripted show. It's basically
Like a
telling the
Richard
story of
David
ISRO.
Attenborough kind of thing
A
doing
little bit,
that.
yeah, yeah. So it like that's a great idea. Like, why not? And Harsha
Hmm.
Bogle is like such a trusted name, and
Yeah.
one doesn't have anything to do with the other, but he is an incredible orator, right? And
Yeah. I suppose that makes a lot of
so
sense because his voice
that
is, yeah.
yeah, so that makes sense. I'm not saying that like not every podcast is an interview show. Sometimes
Yeah.
some shows are you can have. I've worked on fiction shows before. Like I've been a line
Yeah. And that's
producer
when you
for
want the
like
best
scripts and like
voices. And if a cricket
yeah.
commentator has an appropriate
So
voice for that, nothing like it.
yeah, so my thing is that like one of the things that I feel like people are so limited by is they just think that only interview shows are podcasts. And I'm like, that's not true. You
That's not
can
true.
make a
No.
fiction show. You can make
Yeah.
a non-fiction show. You can do a news show. You can do a news bulletin. You
Yeah.
can do like a 3 hour like epic. Like you can do
You can do
whatever you
folk tales. You
want.
can do like how they have the Yakshagana, which is a South Canada dance form. You can do that in audio because those are how the stories were told, and you don't need to watch it. I mean, of course, it'll be helpful to watch the dance, but there's so many.
I've
Yeah,
seen some Yakshagana, my friend. That stuff
it's
is epic.
yeah,
Especially the pyrotechnics when the fire is involved. That stuff is
yeah.
a friend of mine is from like a coastal town in Karnataka called Hiranjalu, and then I got to see some Yakshagana there, dude. That
But
stuff
yeah, I
is
mean, those were all podcasts in their own way. I mean, in the sense storytelling. Um,
absolutely. And so in this way, whether an influencer is just narrating something or an influencer is like, actually hosting the show, it's like two different things. So
yeah,
my space is that I don't have a problem with that. But I also think that and I think this is a limitation of like platforms and this the myopia of the potential of what you could do is that
yeah.
good writing can do that too. You don't need like a celebrity voice all the time. Sometimes you can
Yeah.
just tell a really great story and it be told really well. And so
I
I
think
think
that's where
great
I'm coming
writing
from
can
as
have
well.
that.
I didn't
Yeah.
want to sort of sound like all these celebrities get all the piece of the pie, but you're right. And to just add to what you said, a good story is a good story. Now, it can be made better with a voice and made even more popular with a recognized voice or recognizable voice. But can we start with that, a good story, as opposed to just getting popular voices, popular people to voice I'm not saying always, but sometimes a bad story with a good popular voice doesn't make it a good story. You know what I mean?
Fair. And I mean, this is where I've got nothing against having an influencer or like, I guess you're just trying to push the medium and make it more popular, and I
Yeah,
get that. But I also think that you can do that by doing different things, like
yeah.
work with different formats, do fun stuff. Like, I just feel like no one's like really um breaking the mold really here in like podcasting. I'm not saying that I'm doing some great job at it, but I'm
Yeah, of course. I
trying.
think
Like
we're
my
just
hope
sort
is
of
to be able to
speaking
do
our
that.
thoughts. Yeah, yeah,
And I want to be able to see different people do different things. Like
yeah,
why can't we be listening to a Dalit storytelling podcast? Like why not?
yeah,
Like why can't
yeah,
we do Bengali food stories? Or why can't you do like,
yeah.
some surrealist folk tales from Nagaland? Like who knows? Like it's just
It's a
there's
very
so
rich
much
country we
stuff.
live in. And
Yeah.
we kind of
There's so much
sometimes
fodder.
forget. Yeah, we forget that Bollywood isn't all of our country. I think we
No.
need to understand that the movie cinema industry is not representing all of it. I mean, of course, some great stories have come out of it, but you're right. Like I'd love to listen to like someone living in the hills in the Northeast talking about the people they meet. Maybe like like a Sherpa narrating the stories of climbers he meets or she meets, and it's man, that would be interesting. Let's do the Sherpa podcast.
Yeah.
It,
And again,
yeah,
there's so much. And I'm saying like this is also incredible, right? I had a science journalist get in touch with me, and she started her own podcast,
Right.
which looks at the future of, like, certain things that are happening in India, and then talking to experts to figure out what the future of this particular thing would look like.
Oh,
And
nice.
so it's such a cool idea, and
It
it's
is a
just
cool
something
idea.
that no one else is doing, and I'm just like, wow. And as a journalist, she absolutely understands how to script, how to explain complicated things in simple ways, because
And
that's what
that's
journalists are supposed
important.
to do.
That's very
Yeah.
important to not make it more confusing.
One of the things I struggle with, I swear to you, is the when people do not know how to write for audio at
Yeah.
all, because the written word and the spoken word are not the same.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you an example of something I heard, like a line I heard in a podcast that came out of India. The line was the vicissitudes of our circumstance. Do you understand what that means?
Well, I don't. I'm not going to pretend that. I mean,
I
vicissitude.
don't.
Yeah.
I have no idea
But
what that means. And I'm
I mean, I
like,
feel sometimes we want to look more intelligent than we are. I've heard this a lot in Indian comedy as well, where they take small concepts like, say, going to a urinal and say big words, like the ejaculation of urine from my orifice. I'm like, dude, just say you took a piss, no? Like,
that's terrible. I
yeah.
can't believe it's come down to dick jokes on this interview.
I
Shame
mean,
on you.
life's all about a good dick joke. I think that's Robin Williams has said that. I think.
So
No, and
this
that's
is
what I
where, yeah,
believe.
sorry.
This is this problem. Sorry, Mae. Like, I think that we kind of aren't ready to take that chance, and I think this is from both ends, creators and also people who are in the decision making roles. Is they're not they kind of are don't want to stick their necks out. I'm not saying everyone. There are some great people who've done this and done good for the industry, but creators are scared because they are scared that if they don't follow the template that is approved, they're not going to get their podcast commission or their shows given the green light. And similarly, on the other end, people are like, you know what? This is what I did in the other medium I worked at, other corporate, which was in the other space, in the similar sort of entertainment space. But now I'm just going to do what worked earlier. So I think there's that risk-taking aversion which is there.
Yeah, and also this other thing that I feel like is, like you said, a risk-taking aversion, is that people will come up with ideas, but they won't do it unless someone like underwrites it, right? Like, so they're a
Yeah.
little bit like, so all these really amazing ideas just get relegated into some God knows where. And
Yeah.
I've been, one of the things that I'm hoping for right now is that, like, the whatever little money that I'm able to even just make, that I want to find a way to fund some of the pilots that I want to do, and, make
Yeah.
the shows that I want to make that I think are going to be super cool. And one of the things that I hopefully is what I want to start doing and find ways to do is also pay people what they deserve. I think
My God,
everyone
that
is
would be
about
nice.
undercutting each other. And it's
Yeah.
literally like when someone asks me, I want to work with a certain designer, like a graphic designer, an
Yeah.
illustrator, because I want to find ways to work with designers because I work in an audio medium, right?
Yeah.
And if someone gives me a cost that maybe doesn't work for me, I don't try to bargain them down. But
Yeah.
I figure out a way. Okay, if I can pay you a little more, than great. If I can't, then I'll find another project where I can actually pay you to do something. So
Absolutely. You don't write them off, and you don't. There's this thing. Yeah, you're right. Where you're like,
I'm like, I
oh,
might
can
not be
you?
able to afford you right now, but maybe
Yeah.
another time when I have a little more cash. But it's
Absolutely. But
so
what?
hard. I hate being bargained down.
Yeah. No, people
Or should I
make
do
you
that to other
believe that you're
people?
not worth it. That's what I get irritated. They're like, "Are you sure you want to charge this much?" I'm like, "I'm not pulling this
Are
number out
you
of my ass. I
sure
really
you
think
want to
that I
charge
put
this?
effort into this.
I love that's like it's like reverse asking. Are you sure you want to charge this much?
Yeah. Are you sure? No, no, no.
I'm
I'm
not sure.
not.
That's why I gave you the cost.
I
But
put
this
that
is the
shit in that
thing.
hat and asked a rabbit pull it out.
Yeah.
Fucking
So my
crazy.
thing is that in the same boat, like, so I want to create better standards. I
Yeah.
want to be able to pay people on time. That's the one thing that, like, if people work with me, you will get the money that you pay, like, that you asked me for, I'll pay it, and I'll pay you on time. I'll never, like, even if I have to take the last rupee out of my account and pay you, I'll do that. And it's,
Yeah.
It is, and I'm lucky that I've had great people that I've worked with, right? I'm so
That's
lucky
amazing.
that like I've had a really supportive team who've been there for me through a lockdown and the Yes Bank moratorium because all our company accounts. So I had like, we all go through struggles and last year was a tough one.
Of
But
course.
I'm also excited besides just working on exciting projects.
Yeah.
I also want to be able to do good by the people who work with me because if
Yeah.
you have a good team, then they stick with you, man. And even if they don't, they
Absolutely.
still got your back somehow. Like
No, and
I
this is why
still,
I wanted to
yeah.
talk to you because you're creating something, and I think we're all on this journey, and I think you're doing it on a larger scale with Sean, your partner, and your team. You have. What is nice is that you kind of have to rewrite how things are done. Like for instance, when I started stand up and going for corporates, I'm like, you know what, a stand up comedian. Because what these guys do with artists is like they're relegated to the back of the stage. They're not given water. They just perform and they're treated like a bit, they treated not with the most respect. I'm like, no, no, I come, I go to the bar with you. I'm not sitting somewhere in the corner. If I choose to, I decide where to go. And this is something I feel you're doing with podcasting is build a team, reliability, pay people their due, their fair share, get good stories. And this is something which is hard to probably do now and look at. And sometimes you take a step back going, okay, I'm doing this for the next 5 years, not for tomorrow. And I think that's why I really sort of respect what you do and what you're putting out there.
Yeah. You have to be in it for the long haul, man. You can't
Yeah.
assume that like an entire industry is going to come up overnight. You
Yeah.
have to keep hammering at it. Like I've been in it for now 6 years, and I'm still going to
Yeah.
be in it for a while. And my
Absolutely.
hope is that it keeps growing. My hope is that like we actually get a chance to like build a really interesting industry. And also India, and exactly what you said, there is so much fodder here and so many amazing underrepresented voices that are not being heard in India. And I do think that podcasting, because it's not necessarily mainstream, that you have the ability to say and do things that you wouldn't be able to do in mainstream
For now.
media for now. Hey,
For
touch
now.
wood, yeah. I'm
Otherwise, I
that
have
is
to take down
still
like
to me.
20 episodes from my.
Same here. What are you talking?
But no, it's amazing, me. And I think congratulations first of all on sticking through this journey of podcasting, radio, and I think being such a reliable person and a resource for people who are new in this space, and also giving quality opportunities to people. I think, and thanks for helping out with all my questions, and most
Anytime.
importantly, thanks for being on today's episode.
I know. I felt so privileged. I
It
was
was
like,
good.
wow, I'm on SoapyRao's show. It's exciting.
Yeah, the 5 people who are listening really appreciate it. But no, it's patience. It's a patience game,
Yeah.
and I do it because I thoroughly love doing my solo rants, and I love talking to people. So this is
Yeah.
what I keeps me entertained. Frankly speaking.
Yeah, me too. I think my show has kept, even my own podcast has kept me alive. I think people have probably seen my slow mental decline and degradation through 2020 through my podcast. But
Yeah,
I it really did. Just knowing people were listening and it just brought me such joy to keep doing my show. I can't even tell you.
and I
Even if
think that's the
like you
thing.
said,
You
even if
don't
five people
pretend.
only listening, I still like those 5 people. I love you, all five
Yeah,
of you.
absolutely. And you kind of can be yourself. You going through a bad
Yeah.
day, you say it out loud. You don't kind of pretend like TV makes you put on makeup and like everything's good and sunshine and raindrops or whatever they call it.
Okay, I'm going to be very honest with you here and I'll tell you about this. On one of my last episodes of 2020, I do like a best of where
Yeah.
I pick like some of my best like recording sessions I've done with artists. And at the end of the episode, I had this one bit where I was kind of just thanking people. And it's like a voiceover. I was sitting in my
Did you
cupboard with
say
my Zoom.
spanking people or thanking people?
Thanking,
Thanking.
thanking.
Okay, because I was like, what kind of? I like this podcast now.
Not that one. That's a different podcast.
That's a different. That's
It's
called
not even a
Life Gone Wrong.
podcast. Yeah. So at the end, so my outro VO I was doing, and I was in my cupboard, on my Zoom recorder, and I was
Yeah.
just recording that last bit. And as I'm recording my VO, like in that one part where I'm saying, thank you so much for listening to the show. It's been like a really great support. I don't know what happened to me, but I start like welling up and I'm like in tears, like doing this VO. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? So I stop the recording and like wipe my face and I'm just like, take a few deep breaths and calm down. And I redo the outro VO again. And again, in the same exact spot, I start like welling up and crying. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? And for the third time, I try again because I was just like, okay, let me just like step out of the cupboard. It's kind of hot. I'll put the fan on. Like maybe I'll like, take a couple of walk up and down my room and then after that, I started doing it and I'm not even kidding. Even after that, again, I cry in that exact same spot. And so at one point, I'm like, you know what? Why am I trying so hard to read this voiceover bit when I'm already getting so emotional? So I just read it. And I was weeping in that bit and I just let it happen. And like my poor audio engineer's like, oh, bro, she's fully breaking down on this episode. But he actually initially had cut out all the gaps because obviously I was kind of like trying to like not be so emotional.
Yeah.
And initially he cut out the gaps. I don't want to keep all the gaps in there because the gaps are where like that silence is where the real emotion is.
Yeah.
And so if you go to my best of 2020 right at the end of the voiceover, you will hear me fully break down. You're like, guys, thank you so much. I really love you. Fully there. I'm not. It's just so I decided
no, that's
to
beautiful. Like I'm not sounding cheesy when I say beautiful, but it really is. That's something. If you're having a bad day, you're having a bad day, and you're really feeling what you're saying. You're not trying to pretend that it's all kosher.
I was literally thanking because it's the gratitude, right? You just feel like, wow, I'm so grateful that I am able to live the life I'm living and do the things I'm able to do because of like the support that I have around me. And that's not just like my family and friends. That's also just people who are listening to the show, even if it's 5 people. And so
it makes a lot of difference to know that there's someone
is listening. And so in that bit where I'm like fully breaking down, I realized that I just had to be authentic to myself. I just had to be me. And if I'm going to cry in that exact bit, then I'm just going to cry. And whether my editor hears it, my producer hears it, Sean hears it, you hear it, I'm just like, it was me. Yeah. And if I'm going to try to not be myself, it's not going to be my show then.
I mean, that's the truly, what's the thing?
I'll wait for the day, Soapy, when you break down on your podcast.
I think I've broken down. I think clearly there are some issues which have come out. And I don't think I've broken down in tears, but sometimes it's like, yeah, what the fuck?
You've broken something or you've broken down?
No, I kind of have these moments, that's why I like doing the solo episodes because I have these things which are, niggling at, somewhere within. I'm like, what is going on? Why am I feeling this? Whether it's irritation, frustration, anger, like say with Afghanistan, what's going on right now. I'm like, I'm not a political scientist, I'm not an expert, but just as a human, it pisses me off that there are people out there who have this arrogance that we can go and shatter people's lives just in the name of foreign policy or that we're a superpower, which is bullshit, right? So I just, instead of sometimes maybe a stand-up bit has to be more thought through and has to be funny and has to be peppered with jokes, which sometimes takes away from the emotion. This is my best way of just saying, you know what, I need to get it off my chest, and I'll do it in the best way I think which is possible, which is just sort of introspect, kind of think out loud and kind of just get irritated at the same time, ask myself why you're getting irritated. So I love that I can do that, and there's some people who listen to it.
I love that you just said that because I went through the same thing last year when we were, we were in a global pandemic. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that happens to India is we have border tensions with our neighbors, whether it's like China, Pakistan, Nepal, bloody everyone.
Yeah.
And I was like, we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
And you want to fight across borders? I was just like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And so, which is where like on Independence Day, because I run an indie music show, usually like Independence Day, celebrate indie music is the standard thing.
Yeah.
I decided that I was going to celebrate independent music from our neighbors, which was, I basically found indie musicians from Pakistan, from Nepal, from Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. And so I did the same thing this year because I didn't want politics to dictate how we feel about people in general. Why
And
should
we don't want to
I?
be that medium which portrays that we are different and spreads fear and hate, right? And this is where I believe the strength in India lies, like people like you and people like us who are doing this thing where we talk to people across borders, across languages, across regions,
Yeah.
and we just sort of celebrate ideas and what we're doing, as opposed to policy and opposed to these mass media which is spreading propaganda and this fear and separation. So I'm glad you did that. I'm so glad.
Thanks. And I'm still doing it. And you know what? I had the most fun conversations. Like the last
Yeah.
episode that I released was with this singer-songwriter from Lahore called Natasha Noorani, and we had so much fun. I told her if I come to Lahore, I was like, "Where's the first place you take me?" She's like, "You're coming to my mom's house for a nice meal." I was like,
Oh,
"Wonderful."
excellent.
And like I
Nice.
said, I feel like I'm so lucky that I just basically listen to cool music and talk to cool people.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool job that you get to hear the story behind their music and the song.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put you in touch with a friend who's producing some rappers' albums and tracks, and maybe you can get him on your podcast.
Send.
I'll do
Great.
that. But till then, thank you so much. When I write my first song, and if it's good, I'll approach you.
Even if it's rubbish, that also I
No,
guess.
I'm not. No, no. I'm very self-critical. I can't do that. My
Fine.
Twinkle Twinkle Little Star rendition has to be, up there, like the stars.
I hope they like the stars only. Like twinkling.
But okay, your podcast is made in India, Maed in India. You can
Yes.
guys go check it out. It is good, as May said. Great stories, great musicians, great stories behind the music and about the musicians. And May's a fantastic host, as you guys can hear. She's great fun. And do you want to just give a shout out to your Insta, your social handles, as they call it, so
Yes.
people can follow you?
So if you want to check out the show or check out Made in India, it's Maed in India on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also follow me on Twitter. It's at maybe. That's Maebe. And yeah, I'm so excited and honored that I got to be on SoapyRao's show.
Hey, you're a dyslexic dream come true. Maid spelled Maed. They're like, I got it right.
Correct. It's like I want to go to the bra. You mean bar?
Oh
Maybe
man,
also
but
bra. Who knows?
who knows? Yeah, maybe it's a bar called Bra. Bar Bra. Oh god, that was horrible.
It's terrible.
Terrible on that note.
It's such high standards.
We
Fully
have to
wrong.
end with that joke because come on, it doesn't get better than that. But continue with all the great work. Congratulations on everything you've done so far and keep it going, and appreciate all the help and the advice you've given me and for joining me on the podcast, mate.
Always here for you, man.
Cheers. Thank you.